from FDIC 2012, welcome to Fire Service Court Radio on video. My name is Brad Pinsky, and I'm your host today. With me today is Chip Comstock, Curt Varone, and John Murphy. We are the fire engineering lawyers. I'm going to make that term up. We're the four lawyers on fireengineering.com radio who come to you monthly with a live radio show, and we are all here at FDIC 2012 lecturing today and tomorrow on various topics. And today we want to talk about, some of the hot topics of the week. We've got a good one we can start with the week, and then maybe a little look back through the year. So I think the topic we should start talking about, and I've got to hand the microphone back and forth, is let's talk about what's going in Miami. Who wants to give these facts? I mean, just the issue. Okay, Curt, you want to give these facts?
I'll give it to the best of my knowledge. There was a captain in Miami-Dade who made a Facebook post that was, done on off-duty time, my understanding is, and it was, a personal commentary on an issue that had happened down in Sanford, Florida, where a young black youth was shot under questionable circumstances, and it's really kind of captured a lot of attention in the nation. And the captain down in Miami-Dade had made some comments about some social issues that he felt had impacted those, and he did it in sort of a street vernacular way. And there's a question about whether or not that was appropriate for a public employee to be making, in the way that he had done it. So it really raised the question of, where does the First Amendment protection that we all enjoy end when you're a public employee?
Now, fortunately, we have a First Amendment guru with us who is actually, I think, speaking on First Amendment issues. So, Chip, let me ask you. You've got a guy who says, Curt, you were very nice. He raised the anger of a very large community by saying some very not nice things. Some would call him, I believe, an absolute racist with the comments he made. These are very on-the-line comments. Again, they raised a lot of anger. So here's this guy. He's a member of the fire department, an officer of the fire department, off duty, not at the firehouse, posts very attention-raising, comments, and now the fire department looks at him as a representative almost of the fire department, and the question is, what about some discipline? So what is the law that we have? What guidance can we offer our viewers and listeners on what do you do with somebody who makes these type of comments on, again, a very heated public issue that has nothing to do with that department, right? This is not about that department whatsoever. It's not any knowledge he knows in that department. It's just an issue out there that happens to be in the community, but having nothing to do with the fire department itself.
A public employee has First Amendment rights. There's no question about that, as long as the employee is not speaking as an employee. If he's speaking as an employee, he may not have First Amendment rights. But if he is speaking as a citizen, and then that's the case here, he was speaking as a citizen, like anybody else could on their Facebook, a person has First Amendment rights as long as they're speaking about a matter of public concern. And in this case, arguably, he would say they're matters of public concern, issues about the prosecutor, issues about what the prosecutorial process was taking place. However, a government also has rights as an employer to keep the discipline within the employment ranks. They just they don't have to sit by idly and let the employees run amok, so to speak. And so the tough part is for courts to balance the employees' First Amendment rights versus the employer's rights to maintain discipline. And if you look at historical cases, the courts typically look at, in this type of setting, would say, has there been harm? Has there been issues created with the public? Has the department's reputation been harmed? And if you look at the actual facts in this case, I think the answer is going to be yes. You have actually members of the department itself protesting at City Hall. So in that case, I think if the employer disciplines the employee and the employee files suit, I think the courts are going to uphold the discipline of the employee. And there's another older case that would support this. In the New York City, members of the FDNY had a float in a parade. And on that float, they, through mockery, made fun of the African-American community.
Did they blackface themselves, I thought? I remember that case.
Right. And the court said they had a first, it was talking about some issues in one of the boroughs, and there was some racial tension cases, and they were making fun of it. And the court said they had a right, First Amendment right, to try to make their point. However, again, New York City had a right to maintain discipline and maintain the department's image, and they said these are members of the of a community, of an employer that is supposed to protect the class that they're making fun of. And in that case, they said that the employer had a right to discipline, and I think the facts or the logic would be analogous.
And I think this is a topic we've talked about quite a bit in the past, and the courts have ruled both for and against, I think, on the ability of an employee to post material on Facebook. I think the last NLRB decision was decided. Well, it wasn't really decided. I think they settled, and they talked about, is this water cooler talk? Is it something that you would ordinarily talk about, and with your fellow firefighters or other citizens of the community? The issue here, I think, is it's so racially charged that everybody's up and on edge with whatever could be construed as either violating somebody's rights or trash talking somebody's parenting skills or whatever the issue is. And I think it makes it really more sensitive to an organization when you have somebody in the organization that's maybe speaking out of turn. And I think the other part of this is we've always talked about policy and creating a policy, having a policy, enforcing a policy about using social media and what the effects are. And I know that we've talked about it, probably for the last 2 or 3 years, and people just continue to go out and violate a policy, or a department says, geez, we really don't have a policy to enforce, and so how are we going to do that? And so there's a lot of policy out there. There's lots of social media policy. I know that Curt has written probably 100 of them, and you guys have as well. All corporate America has policies on social media, not restricting the use of it, but kind of controlling the image, I believe, that they want their organizations to project to a community. So certainly in an environment that's sensitive nationally, and it's going to continue to be sensitive, you have an individual who may have some intimate knowledge or an opinion based on some prior experience that he happens to put out over his Facebook, and now we're in having this discussion all over again.
I think one of the things that I know Chip will talk about and I'll talk about in our lectures here is going to be a thing called the Pickering balancing test, and that's really the key guidance that the U.S. Supreme Court has given us for determining whether or not a public employee has a First Amendment right. And the problem with the Pickering balancing test is if you're a judge, it's a wonderful test. If you're a law school professor, it's a wonderful test. If we were sitting around here, it's a wonderful test to talk about in theory. But in terms of the ability of a fire chief or a union official or a typical firefighter to make sense out of that test is just too complicated. And I don't know, possibly this case might give us, and there's some other cases that are sort of percolating through the system in regards primarily to social media that may give the Supreme Court the opportunity to address it. I don't know if they're going to be inclined to try to make it a little bit clearer for us, but the Pickering balancing test is just so difficult, and it's hard to predict which way the court is going to rule, whether or not this individual in this particular case is going to have First Amendment rights or not. And at some point the person has to make a decision to they type out something on their computer and then hit send. And there needs to be some standards in terms of when it's okay to do that and when it's not. If this particular firefighter, maybe if he had changed the words a little bit, or maybe if he had taken the other side of the same issue this would be a non-issue. And I think fundamentally, if you think about the founders of the United States and those who wrote the Constitution, they were trying to say it's okay. You know, that's what we're trying to protect. So I don't know. I think that you know, I think maybe the Supreme Court needs to go back and really kind of take a look at that Pickering balancing test.
The only thing I'd add is that I think that from a practical standpoint, I always refer to it as the stink test. You look and you say, which side stinks more, and that's the side the court's going to rule against. The problem is you don't know that at the time you push your button. You don't know what effect it's going to have in the community. People may ignore it, or you may have people protesting, and you have to have that harm to occur. Once harm occurs, the courts usually rule in favor of the opposite party, and unfortunately by then it's too late. You know, the government's been hurt, the employee's been hurt, it's all over the news, and it's not, there's no real clear guidance, as you've said.
It amazes me because we ended last year, a year ago, on this very video show talking about social media, saying, can't wait to see what next year brings. And yet here we are to the day, you know, discussing these issues. I like to look back, and one of the things I'd like to do is look back on our monthly, you know, and some of our biweekly shows that we've done and talk about some of the issues. One of the issues was very analogous to this that we've talked about, which was a city, I believe, cancels, was it at Swiftwater or Ice Rescue Team, and lo and behold, somebody drowns because the fire department couldn't get to them. The employee, a fire department member here, now specifically talking about the operations of their fire department, goes to the city council meeting, I hope I'm not butchering these facts, goes before the city council and accuses the mayor and the council of killing that individual because they took their money away. And to me, it's the opposite side of this argument, as I would fight it. But that was a great issue. So maybe somebody wants to comment on that, because that led, Curt, that led to a good rule. We have some guidance on that, at least, whether that's acceptable.
I think you may be mixing two cases, but there was the Alameda case in California with the drowning, and then there was a case out of, I believe, I'm not sure if it was Haverhill, Mass.
He's thinking about the case in Ohio, in the Sixth Circuit.
Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right. Okay, I was thinking you were talking about the Alameda case. But you're right, where there was a case in, what town was that? Yeah, in fact, I think I singled that out as one of the top cases last year. Yeah,
yep.
You're right. It was a dive rescue case,
right,
and where the dive team had been eliminated for financial reasons, and then over a relatively short period of time, two people had drowned, and because of the delay in getting a regional team in there as opposed to the local team, they had to wait for a regional or a state team to get in there. The bodies were not promptly found, and a firefighter went to a city council meeting and he did with some pretty strong language accused public officials, and he identified himself. He took some steps to identify himself as a private citizen, that he wasn't speaking on behalf of the department, and so it was pretty clear, and clearly it was a matter of public concern, and those are the two touchstone issues. In order to get to the Pickering balancing test, you've got to be speaking as a private citizen on a matter of public concern, and I forget what's your circuit, the Sixth?
Well, the Sixth Circuit.
Yeah, and they said that he was exercising his First Amendment rights, and they overturned the discipline that was imposed on him.
Actually, the key part of that case was he was disciplined for lying. He made accusations, and they disciplined him for misrepresentations in front of counsel. District Court dismisses the case out, and the firefighter appeals it to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And what they said was it was a matter of public concern, and that they weren't sure which way the Pickering test was going to go, but one of the issues was, does the test even apply if the employee is lying? And the court said that it may not apply if the employee is lying. They don't even get to that point. But the burden of proof of proving that the employee is lying is on the employer. It was on the city. And the appellate court said that there were sufficient facts raised by the firefighter to suggest that what he was speaking was the truth, and therefore they needed to go back and decide, was this in fact, if there's a question of fact as to whether or not he was speaking the truth, and then apply the test. So it's been remanded back for further decision by the trial court. But I thought it was very interesting because it came down very hard on the city council and in favor of the firefighter, giving him the benefit of the doubt on these issues.
And And what gets me is, as a fire captain, now I've got 3, fire chiefs here, as well as lawyers, but, as a fire captain, to me, that's complete insubordination. And that it guts at me when I see, okay, well, we've made a decision in the fire service, we've decided to purchase this engine, and one of our captains or lieutenants or firefighters can go to the city council and say, oh, the chief made a horrible decision, it's going to impact public safety, he's made the worst decision possible, he's incompetent, he's not trained, whatever it is, and now we want to discipline him from insubordination, and maybe we can't. And I'm curious how this sits. I mean, it guts at me. So should firefighters be able to say anything they want just because it's a matter of public concern?
I think in the right forum. And again, they're firefighters by profession, but they still are citizens and have a right as a citizen to speak. I think the issue, again, all of these issues when it comes to budgetary cutbacks and programs, and unfortunately somebody dies as a result of that. We're seeing that sort of trend across the country, that there's major programs have been cut out, and I know we alluded to the Alameda case and these ice water rescue cases, and swim teams and dive teams are very expensive. And so, the city council and the mayors and that sort of elected officials are making some, pretty challenging decisions to reduce services. And so it becomes, again, an emotional issue. And so, does the firefighter have the right to either go to a city council meeting or have a meeting privately with a mayor or council people independently and express his opinion not in a public forum? And will the same results occur? Does he get disciplined? Probably not. Does the chief get, disciplined for not having policies about firefighters speaking? How can you restrict that sort of activity? And so, again, we go back to this. If it wasn't such an emotional issue, would it even be an issue at all? And second of all,
of course, it'll be over.
Are we scaring the city councils away from making budgetary cuts on programs that may be popular, or because 20 firefighters like to dive and it's fun, but it really serves no useful purpose for the community? Do they have the right to cut it? And so, I think we're going to be facing with those challenges, and we have faced them already in the past, and again, we're going to be seeing those more in the future as it deals with, ability of the firefighter to speak out because he has some intimate knowledge about the effects of the program on the community.
Right. Another aspect to what because I'm sensitive to the concern you raise, and it's an issue in a lot of different fire departments. The line that seems to be drawn is whether or not what the firefighter is complaining about is a petty grievance or a private grievance, or is really a matter of public concern. And if there was, let's say, some fraud, and we recently dealt with a case or discussed a case where there may have been some insider dealings on some fire truck purchases, and certainly a firefighter who's seeking to bring that to light, that there was some impropriety in the bid process. Certainly you don't want to silence, you don't want to stifle employees that are going to be disclosing improprieties. On the other hand, if the person is just going to be whining about, we wanted this particular manufacturer instead of that particular manufacturer, and it's really, really of a minor nature, a personal preference kind of thing, it's really a personal grievance or a petty grievance and not really a matter of public concern. So that's how the courts have sort of come down on that.
Besides that dichotomy, there's one other one, and that is, has the fire department provided sufficient opportunity for the firefighter to present his or her grievances within the department and up the chain of command? There are some departments that they say, thou shalt not file any grievances, thou shalt not talk to the mayor, thou shalt not do anything. And in those cases, again, the courts are saying, what are you doing? These people have important information that they need to share with the public. And so in those cases where the department itself has tried to eliminate the ability of the firefighter to present his or her concerns, they usually find in favor of the firefighter.
They call it a prior restraint.
Right. Well, even where, the prior restraint is a ban on complete speech, but we could just have thou shalt not talk to the mayor, even though you may do other things. However, if you have a chain of command policy that says you need to start, you have an issue, you go through the chain of command, and then you can bring it, after you've given the chief the opportunity to address your concerns, then you can bring it to council as a citizen. that's okay. They're usually going to say that's okay. And so what happens, the firefighter wants to jump around that chain of command, and he wants to go immediately run to the mayor. Again, the courts aren't that much in favor of the firefighter in those instances. They say, hey, you know what, this is a paramilitary organization. You need to address these things in a proper order, and we're not going to let you start creating issues within the department by running around the chain of command. So I think it's really good that you have policies in place that address the chain of command.
And in those cases, you're not punishing the firefighter for what he said. You're punishing him because the process he used to say it. He violated the chain of command. That's frankly what I think we should be doing. And frankly, on Facebook, I'm in favor of policies where you say, look, say whatever you're going to say, but when you say it, you must post this disclosure. You are not speaking on behalf of the fire department. I'm not an authorized representative. And so then when they say something like that, and they don't post, I'm not an authorized representative, now you're punishing them for not posting that. Not for what they said, just for not disclaiming.
But again, let's get back to the Florida case. They say, would it have made any difference? I think everybody who looked at that Facebook posting in the Florida case is saying, we know he's not posting on behalf of the department. They later identified him as a captain, but it still created the issues. It created the harm. And so, you know, again, there's a lot. The problem with the First Amendment issues is, as Curt said, they're not simple. There are a lot of different variables that, you know, each case has to be taken in and of itself, and that's what makes it so hard for the employer or the employee. But you know, I'm just a believer if it's really something that's going to be concerned, you want to take it through a chain of command. And there was a recent case that Curt and I talked about out of Georgia, where a person raised an issue on Facebook about some mistreatment within the department. They thought it was a police case, and they thought, you know, the police force was granting some favors to some relatives. And in that case, the court said, you know, this is a matter of public concern. This is something that they should have First Amendment rights with, but if it was that important, how come they didn't address it through the chain of command to the superiors or others within the city? Why did they just post it on Facebook? What was the real purpose here? And so they looked at that and said, you know, that First Amendment right isn't that great when she could have gone, it was a female officer, could have gone to the chain of command, raise the issues internally, and if that didn't get a response, then go external.
Let's do a couple other minutes, however much time we have, on the issues from the prior year, a couple of quick topics that we really liked. And I'm going to hand this over to John. One of the issues, we had somebody, a guest on, Dr. Beth Murphy, and we were talking about mental health issues and what to do, because there were some cases that had come out at the time where I actually had the benefit of privately talking to one of the individuals, and without going through all the facts, basically what do we do for our employees when they may seem suicidal, what obligations do we have? And we had Dr. Beth come in and talk to us about, you know, what employees or employers can do for their employees, and we had some discussion about what rights, what obligations do we have when we see a post-traumatic stress employee. And Curt, I'll bring you in as well, because you talked about what the police do, and I thought that was important enough we should bring that up again. Let's do that.
Well, we do have Dr. Beth Murphy over in the peanut gallery, and she's not paying attention to us.
Not paying any attention whatsoever.
She's ignoring us. But we're talking about PTSD and suicide and policies and observations and whatnot. And I think that the conversation we had at the time was taking because yesterday when we were talking to another gentleman from Colorado, had a firefighter that had like suicidal ideology and was talking the talk. But had subtle signs prior to them recognizing that there was a severe issue going on. And so they finally steered him into counseling, and then he retired out of the department because it was just too stressful. And the fire officer looks back at it, he goes, you know, there was just so many subtle signs that I missed. And so I'm thinking that we're missing a training opportunity here to teach the fire officers and firefighters to recognize the subtle symptoms, because the big symptom is you got a dead firefighter and it's too late. And I know that Phoenix, I think Arizona has probably had 4 or 5 suicides in their organization through public service, and everybody's wondering, what are we missing? What are we missing? And you're going to miss it sometimes. But I think recognition, early intervention, not saying, oh, you know, Curt's crazy and he's always been that way, because, you know, there may be something going on that we should be recognizing, we should be seeing. And I think as fire officers and educators, we need to talk about it, and we need to bring professionals in to help us recognize recognize those symptoms and get firefighters steered in the right direction so they get taken care of before the fatal result occurs.
And I think, the fire service is really a cross-section of society, and we do have our mental health issues. There are
some of us more than others.
I mean, yes, of course, and everybody's got their issues. But really, when it comes down to some of the suicides that we're seeing. We're kind of hard on each other in many ways, and there's a group mentality. When someone is starting to act a little strange, they get a little bit alienated, and then they act a little stranger and they get a little bit more alienated, and sometimes instead of actually reaching out and getting that person some help, the people are ostracized, the individuals are ostracized. Then I think that there's a closer recognition in the law enforcement about having psychological services available for the officers, and it could be because they're armed, but they're much more attentive to that. And certainly I teach a class on discipline, and one of the things that we recommend whenever a firefighter is going to be disciplined, that support services be made available, particularly where it's going to lead to termination, because it's not a typical stress, it's an atypical stress that could push someone, and possibly it was stress that led them into the situation to begin with. And I'm not trying to be soft on crime, soft on misconduct, but at the same time, if there's a psychological reason and we can fix, if we have a vehicle with a transmission problem, we fix the transmission problem and put the vehicle back on the road. And sometimes we don't apply the same thought process to our people as well. So, but I think the cops are ahead of us on that regard, and most departments have a psychologist or psychiatrist that's available to them to help them guide their departments through some of these issues that they have with individual officers, and make the decision, and particularly when the person's going to be terminated, there to help that person through the stresses of that that life change.
Want to comment? We got to wrap this up. I want to thank all our listeners and watchers, and I want to invite everybody back to see John, Curt, Chip, and I, either speaking here or certainly listening to our monthly Blog Talk radio show, as well as all the other phenomenal speakers on that show. We look forward to hearing your issues. You can always email us and let us know what you'd like us to talk about, and hopefully we can give you some advice that keeps you and your department on the right path and staying out of trouble and in the public's eye of the good people. So whatever we can do to help the fire service out, I think we all want to do. So from Fire Engineering 2012, I want to thank all of you, and again, John, Curt, Chip, for attending, and have a great show. Have a safe and legally healthy year.